and good evening. I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of Talking with Springfield Township, your opportunity to talk with those in the know in the township. I'm very fortunate to have with me at the round table two wonderful people that are joining us as always, Mike Hinnenkamp, as well as trustee Gwen McFarlin.
We're glad to be here.
Glad you could join us both.
Great to be here.
Especially after a interesting afternoon known as the State of the Township. It's a good way to kind of do a follow-up of what's been going on. And as we say, always, you have to learn from your past to go forward. And the last time we did have our talking with, I was here with Joe Hunter-Law as well as Dan Burning, and we discussed the Jets. Very difficult discussion because it's something that was new to the township and something that was going to move the township forward in a direction that it hadn't been before.
Right.
It passed. And how do we feel now that we are in a few months with that jet? Obviously, we're not seeing miraculous numbers change, but we're starting to see that change occur.
No question, Jason. I mean, it's doing, I think, exactly what we expected. And, you know, kind of looking back to the Jeds, yes, it's a lot more comfortable and a lot more pleasant to be here now than it was. I don't think that was, you know, that whole process was difficult to go through. I know from the board perspective, that's not something the board was eager to do. It was kind of our last resort. You know, we had tried and put so many different things together as alternatives, and most of those worked in a way, but it just wasn't enough. And we needed that last piece. In the Jeds, which was the levying of a 1.5% earnings tax, was sort of that piece. I think it was very divisive. It was a difficult issue. Because as you said, it's not just an earnings tax. When townships do it, it's much more complicated because of the way the law is. So there was a tremendous amount of confusion, and you know, folks just don't want more taxes, and I think we all understand that. But in short, it's you know, the early returns it's hitting exactly where we thought it would in terms of revenues, probably a little better. We were intentionally conservative in our estimates.
As you always have been.
We have been.
We've always been.
We still don't know because it's, you know, but looking at the projections and where we've come in based on, you know, the revenues that have been received to date, it's doing, you know, we'll definitely bring in what we thought and then some.
And I think that's going to be a pivotal piece as we talk about the state of the township, because now that you have that new wedge in your pie, you're able to do these things that are going to help this 5-year, 10-year, 15-year projection going the road. Now,
I think it's important to remember, too, that the Jeds was not established to be the solution. It was established to be part of the solution. And so I think and we attempted to the best of our ability to reinforce that to the individuals that we met with, spoke with, and talked with in the grocery store, and et cetera. And it's just the major thing was we wanted to sustain our township. We had to find some type of tool, some type of agent, so that we could move forward and prepare for a better future for the township.
And being thankful that you made it in at, for we say, that cutoff time, because at this point townships don't have that tool any longer in their toolbox.
Yeah, it's really a shame. It's really, I think, the travesty of the letdown on the state to have looked at such individual situations. There were some communities that were using it improperly, and you know, they sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater in some of their decisions, and that's what we've seen. It's been very frustrating. Not to sit here and whine about the state. It is in the past, but you're right. We were just able to get that in under the gun, and I even though we went through so many hearings and so much discussion about it last year, I still, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday during the state, still will have people saying, what are you doing with all that Jeds money? And I'm saying, you know, we're filling a gap that we lost half of our money. Right. The Jed doesn't fill that cup the rest of the way. It fills it about half of the portion that was missing. So there's still, compared to where we were back in 2007, 2008, we're still looking at 800 or so thousand to $1 million of revenue that we still don't have. We think we can make up that difference. With some other things that we're doing. We're going to have to, because there really aren't any other options. But the bottom line is the Jeds gives us a fighting chance. It puts us in a position. It certainly doesn't make us flush with dollars. And as Gwen said, we knew that wasn't the intention.
And it is at least a breath. It's not going in day by day going, are we going to make it next month? Are we going to make it next year? And not that, you know, Township was closing the doors or anything like that, but it was getting pretty dark and dismal.
Yeah, it was getting extremely dark and dismal, and I think the skills of Mike working with his team and with my fellow colleagues, the trustees, as well as our fiscal officer, we really had to hunker down and really try to determine where we were going and how we could do it and still sustain the township.
But hasn't that always been the great part of the core of the township? Is
yes,
the great team?
Yes, yes, it has.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think a lot of credit goes to the board because they showed incredible patience, and they really held the staff accountable to look under every rock and do everything possible before we went that route, knowing that was sort of the last resort. We knew it was going to be unpleasant in a lot of ways, but without it, I don't know where we'd be. I really don't. We'd really be in trouble.
And Gwen, you've probably, with being on the board, looking at many options and going through this, sounds like it could have been, or probably is, one of the hardest decisions you had to make.
It's one of the hardest decisions since I've been a township trustee that we've had to make. And we had to stay focused. That was very important, that we remain focused and work together as a team and try to be as transparent as possible, and which we did an excellent job of doing that. So it was one of the most challenging moments that I've had since I've been there. And we're all very fiscally conservative, and I think you shared that earlier.
Yeah.
And that helped us a lot because we didn't react. We were very proactive as we began to chip away at looking at the what other alternatives there were there. And I have to, Mike did a great job in pushing and looking for other alternatives. But when it was all said and done, there wasn't any. And we didn't want to increase taxes like property tax or anything like that. We just wanted to sustain our township, and that was important.
And now that we have this in place, and as we've just discussed here, we've got at least something filling that cup, as opposed, using the analogy, as opposed to having a dry cup and not knowing where we're.
Yeah, at least a portion of it.
Yeah.
We made up a portion of what we lost.
Which I think, again, leads into a great discussion here with, of course, the state of the township from Saturday or Sunday afternoon. This is our annual discussion to the community in regards to what's going on. And I think this was that better opportunity to say, hey, the dark times are behind us. We're actually looking at programs and projects in the next 5 years that are going to better the community. I was actually looking at a lot of things for it and realizing that the Springfield Township's motto, a community of neighborhoods, a great place to live,
yes,
is really finally taking that root after seeing last night's State of the Township. Was that the decision, or was it finally, oh, thank goodness, the hard part's over, let's look at something lighthearted for a change? I mean, there are some hard decisions to make in the next 5 years, I understand, but it's nothing like what we've had to talk about in the last 3 years.
Yeah, you're right, Jason. There's a lot of tough decisions, so we don't want to make it sound like, hey, it's over, but it is, I think I said yesterday, certainly it's been very gloomy. I've been doom and gloom. Every presentation has been bad news, bad news, bad news. And as we've discussed with the board, we've discussed with our staff, the thing that I say to them is we finally have a chance to stop playing defense. We're going to go on offense for a change. And for the last 6 or 7 years, we've been so internalized and so focused on how we can cut, how we can dismantle, how we can save, a penny here. And in some cases, when that results in a cut of service, then I don't know that you've accomplished anything. I mean, it's easy to cut. That's not a difficult thing to do. I could have slashed $3 million out of our budget. That's not the point. The point is what are the residents losing in terms of services, and long term, how is that going to impact their property values? How is that going to impact them in other quality of life ways? And so the key was trying to find a way where you can minimize the impacts and prioritize. There's some good things that came out of those difficult times. With any time a crisis presents opportunity, and I think we took advantage of some of those opportunities, but it was just one kick in the head after another. Absolutely. And every time we thought we had a solution, something else would pop up. I described it as like whack-a-mole. You knock this one down and some other problem. And that's a little bit what we do every day anyway, but these were big moles that were coming out of the ground.
And a lot of them were unseen.
They were unseen at the time, and you didn't know what was going to be next, and maybe we still don't. So hopefully the legislature doesn't have other surprises in store for us. We think they realize they've hurt local government bad, and we're hearing that from them. But as you said, now we've got an opportunity to go on offense. We've got an opportunity to start looking externally in our community. Our services are in solid shape. They always have been. We think they're right-sized. And it's a matter now of getting out into our neighborhoods and building our business community back up and doing some exciting things. And that's why I'm really, really optimistic about what the next 3 to 5 years hold.
Well, let's take a look at both sides then. Neighborhoods. Obviously, when someone says, let's revitalize the neighborhood, some people will go right off and say, well, roads is one thing and this is another. What is your vision for this new, I won't say maybe not necessarily new, but this opportunity to finally go out there and say, our neighborhoods, our people are our community, and that's who we service?
Well, I think the first part of it is, our master plan talks about, housing strategies. And so while we've identified the agenda sort of broadly, now we've got to get into the details and talk about specifically what kinds of housing strategies are necessary. Housing, I think, is the most critical part. We're a bedroom community.
Sure.
While we want to enhance our business and bring more businesses into the township, it's going to be limited because of our land use patterns. So we must, improve the quality of our housing in every one of our neighborhoods and have specific and unique strategies for each neighborhood. Infrastructure is a major part of that, as Gwen knows.
It definitely is. And what I heard, some of the feedback from yesterday's meeting was, we need to look at the current businesses that are here, retain them to the best of our ability, and bring in new businesses. And it has a lot to do with, we are rebranding our township, and how we can attract new businesses at the level that our residents are expecting and asking. And it also relates to the housing stock. What does it look like? I know that our property values have dropped, but I also know that there seems to be some stabilization and more individuals are purchasing homes now versus renting homes, so that's a good step in the right direction.
And with these changes, obviously, I'm assuming we're going to probably see some zoning changes along with it, especially because of the business area, or are we going to?
I don't think there's going to be any dramatic.
I don't think dramatic. I mean, there's with our zoning plan we've created in the remake of our zoning several years ago, we've created flexibility.
Okay.
One of the trends that's sort of going around nationally is something that's known on form-based codes, and that focuses a little less on uses and more on the standards.
Okay.
It's kind of it's not, I won't call it neo-traditional, it's not that, but there's a recognition that there's some success with blending uses and not having to sort of the old model where you separate uses and you sort of have this pyramid that's single family and then something, maybe a two family, and all the way down to multifamily, and then at the bottom of that rung is heavy industrial.
Right.
We're not talking about putting heavy industrial next to single family,
absolutely.
but there is a recognition that the blend and having some retail mixed in close proximity or even in the same building as retail and residential makes some sense. Walkability is what is is desired by everybody, and we have a community that, for the most part, has a great deal of that. So that's something that has me most optimistic, is that our community, the existing infrastructure lends itself well to some of the new trends, and I think we can make that transition a lot easier than some of the outlying communities who have these beautiful big homes, but there's no sidewalks, there's no connectivity to them. You have to get in a car to do everything. We have some ability in a good portion of our township to create those sort of nodes in that neighborhood retail that'll
and obviously
make it more walkable.
Witten Road is your biggest example,
It
right
is.
there.
Yep.
And with the improvement of the Witten and Galbraith area there, and then moving back up north towards the administration building, you see all that change. But the wonderful thing that we're mentioning, you can walk to that.
Yes.
Or
every bit of it.
you can bike.
Or you
Because
exactly.
I've been an advocate for bike trails, and we are doing a lot of work in revisiting that and reviewing that whole concept. And if you create bike trails, where would they connect? And ultimately, it seems like the bike trails, if we could get it to just blend in with Winton Woods and then possibly with Glendale, there's a bike trails and I was amazed at how many of our residents actually ride a bike to work. And I discovered that many times what they do is they ride down Center Hill and then hit Spring Grove and go in that manner because
they're going down far then.
Yes.
Wow.
So
daring people.
Yes, yes. But that's opportunities for us as well in the township.
But see, what you're discussing are new opportunities that are happening within the township. When Mike and I sat down last year, that wasn't even an inkling in the eye, which is wonderful things to hear about.
It is. I mean, and I think that goes to what I said. We were so bunkered down into just trying to keep the lights on, and now that we've crossed that bridge, and like I said, there's still plenty of challenges. I don't want to make it sound like we're out of the woods yet, but you know, at least we can start doing some proactive things and focus on some moves that are going to better it, not just defensive moves.
Going back to Gwen's point you had made about the housing stock, you know, a lot of people are now changing that mindset from rent to own.
Yes.
That kind of changes things for the township as well, because again, we're used to so many people within the community that they stay in the community.
That's absolutely correct.
That is very helpful. And at the same time, you're trying to get people to come in as well. How do you feel that's going to now change with the idea of owning as opposed to renting?
I see it as a wonderful option, and I also see more of our residents, as I said, not wanting to leave the township, and so they're looking for a place to stay, to move as they downsize. And as they downsize and leave, then there will be opportunities for younger couples and individuals to come into the township as well. And when we look at the possibility of development in the township, we've been working with the CIC, that we've developed a relationship with St. Francis Group, and then we're just going to look at that site where Warder Nursery is and get some feedback from them regarding where do we go from here, what opportunities are there to make that a real viable community.
Sure.
And that will attract individuals as well and families.
Well, you know, if something were to happen, when was the last time a brand new community was within the township?
Wow. Yeah, it's been some time, especially the type of community that we're envisioning. You know, when you look at the housing, not only the housing by our neighborhoods, there's an opportunity to look uniquely at each of those neighborhoods because each of them have unique characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses. So it's not one plan fits all. For the Warder development, I think it's going to be very similar to that in the sense that what we're looking at is something that continues what we are, and that is a very, very diverse community. It's not a one-style type development that we're looking at. We're looking at something for everyone. You touched on the rental. While there's a mindset that rental equals negative, I don't think that's really true anymore. You're seeing a lot of folks that don't want to own by choice. And because they want to be more flexible in what they can do, you're seeing a higher end demand. Probably the biggest thing that we know that we have a shortage of or almost nothing for is a very upscale attached product that an empty nester might be looking for. They want the high amenities, but they don't. You know, they no longer want to maintain the yard because they're going to be very active. They want to be able to move. On the same token, you're seeing a higher end rental for young professionals, and that's a demographic we need to attract as well. And as Gwen said, by doing those two things, the existing housing stock is then opened up for the young family, which is sort of, you know, logjam right now because those folks aren't moving out because there isn't anywhere for them to go. So it's kind of a combination of all those things. It's not one specific plan, but Warder more than anything else isn't about the 50-acre development. It's about how does that 50-acre development serve as a catalyst for opening up other things. And that is not just in that immediate area, that is throughout the township and sort of changing the whole perception that one might have regionally about what Springfield Township is about.
And I figured that's what it was going to be, is like, let's start with one neighborhood, it's going to probably bounce to another, and that's the wonderful thing about the township. Again, we're going about this idea of neighborhoods and finally hitting that home a little bit further, that we are the township, but we're also Finneytown. We are also, you know, the farms. We are many different facets. And so you're going to start seeing those things. You did mention the CIC, which is finally up and running and a wonderful thing. Partnership with that, how do you feel that is in development, where that's going, what you see with the CIC?
Well, the CIC, again, is a community improvement corporation that was formed by the township last year. While I think the first year we sort of spent dealing with the organizational aspects of it and it's sort of taking on its very, very basic role. One of the things that the CIC, I think, does for businesses as well as for property owners that didn't exist before is while it's going to serve as the economic development agent for the township, and for the most part, the average resident won't see the difference from that standpoint, whether we were doing it as a CIC. It's generally the same people. It's the structure that's different. This gives us greater flexibility. One of the things I'm excited about, and we're still in the formulation stage of this, is we can create unique incentives. There's a whole slew of state and county incentives available to businesses. And we play a role in those, but those incentives aren't necessarily unique from one community to the other. For the most part, they apply across the state, and we can utilize those. The CIC will be sort of that ombudsman that can kind of help hold a business's hand through that process. We can help be their advocate if they need to navigate that process, which is mostly a county or a state function. What I'm excited about is the unique things that we can do. The residential incentive grant is such an example to where if you work and live in Springfield Township, and so you're paying this new JEDS tax, we have an incentive to say, if you live here, or if you don't and you want to live here, you can essentially avoid that tax by becoming a township resident, or if you're an existing resident, you're being rewarded for staying. So that's an example of something that's been unique that we've created. I would like to see the CIC, and we've had some discussions about this, continue doing those types of things, creating sort of those unique programs that can be tailored specifically for our businesses and for our residents wherever we think that need is, whether that's incentivizing them to invest in their property, whether that be residential or for that business. So there's a variety of ways we can do that. We're just talking about that. One of the things we're trying to do is get out and talk to all of our businesses. I mean, that's a very ambitious schedule to do, but slowly to do that and get their feedback of what are the gaps, what are the things that they're seeing as a problem, what's keeping them from being successful in our community, and what can we do to try to aid that. Obviously we're not going to be all things to all people, but get some sort of. So I think that's going to be probably the thing that excites me most, and then just play that role that we have and have a huge role on the development of what we call the core of the ward or property. We're going to be working, the CIC will actually be working very hand in glove with that preferred developer who we've just chosen.
And it's interesting because after our meeting yesterday, I was speaking with a couple of residents, and I, for some reason, always assumed and made the assumption that our gateway coming into the township was up Galbraith once you got off a cross-county highway. And she really made me more aware that for her, the gateway is coming up Winton Road and crossing over North Bend. And how that appears to her when she crosses over North Bend and moves into her community. And she had some excellent points, some excellent concerns. And so we took notes on some of her concerns, and it was really a nice discussion because she also said that right now with all of the construction that's going on with the 75, people want to come up Winton Road home versus Cross County home. So there's another gateway that we could look at as well, to look at how we can improve that entrance, when you come into the township.
And with as many different entryways to the township, it's hard to pick which one might be the one or the one. And you've hit the major ones, you really have, but now to be able to look at the others and say, well, that's viable there, and that's another means to welcome people home. It also brings that incentive, as you're saying. Do you feel that these incentives are going to keep? As a trustee, let's take a look from that side. Do you think these incentives from the CIC or other alternatives will bring more business, or will it definitely keep those businesses here?
Because I believe it will bring more as well as keep them. And it's like a double-edged sword.
Oh,
it will work both ways. I mean, in speaking with the couple individuals that we were speaking with yesterday, they've lived here all their lives, and their parents lived here. So they've been here for a long time, their lifetime. And they don't have any plans to move. And they're having children, and their children are staying here. And so I think the incentives that we're talking about would just continue to be an asset for the township to bring in new individuals, but retain the ones that we have as well. And I think when you look at, as Mike was sharing, with the, if you're working in the township, there's an incentive to stay in the township.
Yeah.
And it also can open up doors for individuals who are thinking, well, you know, that township is really growing and it's very prosperous and it's got great leadership, of course. and when we drive through there on our way to work, you know, we're coming down Winton Road, and the moment we get into Springfield Township or leave our neighborhoods, not on the county roads per se,
Right.
but in the county, this is pretty nice. So we think we're going to stay here.
And that's what you want. You want to keep that perpetual.
Right.
Jason, I think the incentives that we're talking about, while they're business incentives that we're talking about, and individuals, we're also looking at what can we do for our neighborhoods.
Yes.
And even though we've, you know, with this development and order that sort of focuses on the Finneytown neighborhoods of the township, we're paying very close attention to what's going on in Pleasant Run Farms.
Sure.
And some of the ideas that we have are to how can we engage our neighborhood associations, our civic associations, to get involved in maybe creating some of the JED money that can be competitively you know, sort of bid for these neighborhoods to do, quote, public/private partnerships. So very in the early stages, but we want to get citizen involvement. We want our neighborhoods to feel engaged, and Pleasant Run Farms is certainly an area that we're looking at. We've had some early
Absolutely.
discussions with some of their civic association folks, and, you know, on their athletic board and their pool. We want, you know, these are all areas that you know, you have to look through the whole township. It's a large township.
And as you've always
not
brought
focusing
up,
on one
that, you know,
area.
you don't overlook anything.
No.
You
No.
always look at
No.
some other possibility to bring, whether to bring in someone to help somebody out.
Right.
It's always been to that degree. Of course, we hit two of the four major ones, the economic development and the community. We were also looking at possibilities, some services that the township may or may not be helping along with, being, obviously, we still have to keep with police and fire, being
Absolutely.
being
That's
top
it.
notch.
That's exactly
But
right.
what else are we looking at as well?
I think from a service standpoint, it's just how can we deliver those services more efficiently? You know, and you're always looking to tweak them so that the cost is maintained. Generally, your costs are always increasing because those are largely personnel-based services. So as cost of living goes up and salaries increase, it's hard to control that aspect. So we've got to do everything we can otherwise to make sure that we're trying to keep those costs where the level of service is not affected. You know, and residents aren't seeing that, well, yeah, okay, you save money, but I'm getting less for that. So internal consolidation has been huge. Getting our police officers, and some of them are now starting to go through training to become first responders.
Okay.
EMTs, you know, first level, what's known as a first responder, to provide some emergency services, because a lot of times they're the first ones on the scene. So we
Right.
want to get that sort of bare bone, you know, training in place. So that's been a big thing. Doing the same thing with utilizing our fire department in development services and plan reviews and inspections and nuisances, things like that, using that existing staff that's already doing it for building permit reviews. It's just a natural. And the fire department's been great. They've been working with us to do that. Those are little things. They're not terribly sexy, but they, you know, all those little things start adding up to gaining some efficiencies. You know, probably the biggest concern is our infrastructure, and that's
Yes,
the one that
absolutely.
because it's such a big ticket item, and there's not going to be an easy solution to it. But that one, and then looking finance-wise, is combining our levies, something that we want to talk about doing. I think those are the things that are probably the next two biggest agenda items in coming up with a solution or a game plan. We've identified a lot of options.
Sure.
The board's in the next probably year going to have to pick a direction, and we're going to have to start knocking out some of those things.
And as we've seen in the past, you know, these are still issues that are, you have to talk about them. They are
must
there,
talk
and
about
you
them.
can't
Yes.
ignore it. There's just no ignoring it. But as you've seen in the past, you've grown from what you've learned, and you know directions to go. Gwen, again, I'll ask us from the trustees side, you're probably not looking forward to looking at these things, but these are things that you're going to have to, as we're saying, knock them out.
We're going to have to knock them out, and one of the attributes that we have as trustees is that we're business owners, and we think very critically, and we care about our township. And we are experienced. We've survived 2014 and 2008, and we're continuing to grow and think out of the box. and also have to attribute a lot to how our staff are working together to come up with some creative solution as well. And from the service department, we've done a lot as far as looking out for grants, especially SCIP grants, and I think we've, what is it, about $1 million?
Oh yeah, in 14 we were able to secure over $1 million in grant monies.
And
so that allowed us to double the $1 million we spent.
Sure.
Right, and it keeps our neighborhood solid, you know. But again, as Mike has indicated, our biggest challenge is maintaining the infrastructure because we are a large, fragmented community, and we're trying to catch up with some of the infrastructural changes and problems, but it's going to take some time to do that.
Sure.
So we're always looking at creative things. Given that communication to the department heads, Mike has done an exceptional job of helping them to continue to think out of the box, and they've come up with some wonderful things. I think one of the really neat things, and I don't know where it's going from here, is that Rob Leininger, our fire chief, he has been looking at EMTs, how we can merge them into the community. When an individual is an aging person perhaps, or maybe not an aging person, but has been discharged from the hospital,
Okay.
and they can come back into their community. And there may be a way that there appears to be a great way for the EMTs to provide home care to them. Now, it's still in the early stages,
Sure.
you know, but those are possibilities.
But again, these are things that you're looking forward to as opposed to, you know, not even bringing it up to
they're
the table.
value-added
Yeah,
services.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, Jason, just on the infrastructure issue is, while that's a daunting task for us, we're not unique. I mean, this is
it's not
something
the
that
only
almost
crowd.
every single community, other than maybe one of the really new ones, is facing this issue. I don't think we're facing this issue as a state head-on. I don't think we're facing this issue as a country head-on. And, you know, simply if you look, all you got to do is look at the Brent Spence Bridge as
It's
a
a
prime
perfect
example.
Perfect
Yes.
example.
We all know it
Yes.
needs to be replaced, and nothing's happening.
And I mean,
Because
granted,
it's
we
a-
all have our own ideas of how the best to solve it, but you know, when it comes down to it, we are electing individuals who want to do it, and there's that stalemate, and
Yeah,
no
there's
one
that.
wants to give that answer
Well,
out.
because of none of the answers are easy.
Easy. You're
And
correct.
I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of our board for, is that, you know, they face really difficult decisions and they don't do what's popular
Right.
or expedient for them individually, and especially politically. You know, our board is, you know, these are folks that aren't looking for political careers.
No.
They're doing what's right, and a lot of times that's unpopular, but it's why we're where we
It's
are.
where you are
As
today.
a community. It's because of this board. It doesn't matter what staff can do. If we don't have a board that will make the tough decisions, then, you know, it's not going to happen. And all too often at all levels of government, they're going to do what's going to get them votes, not what's really the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And that is, of course, is what we're dealing with here is obviously growing and
Absolutely.
maintaining. And finally, one of the last things that were brought up, we're bringing back programs to the community, which is great. It kind of, again, goes with that idea of encompassing everything that's going on in the community. And last year, we did see Arts Connect finally launch itself off the ground from its small beginnings to where it is today. And 2015, Kim and I have already spoken about many things, and I'm seeing some wonderful things happen that are actually bringing the community back
Absolutely.
together. Obviously, this is a very conscious decision that you've made. Probably, I won't say this was probably one of the easier ones to make, but it probably, again, it took time to get us there.
Absolutely.
If you know, we go back a few years, we always had something going on in the community. Well, we had again, Mike, you looked at everything, and things had to go back. Now
Well,
we're able to see some
Yeah,
things.
I think
again.
Kim's done a fantastic, Kim Flam, who's
Yes.
our
Yes.
projects, events, and communication coordinator, and also the director of Arts Connect, which is the nonprofit. You know, we talked about
Yes.
the CIC. Well, this is the arts part. And again, the idea is, how do we take that off the township's, you know, books and allow that to be privatized, yet still fulfill that mission and make sure that that's being taken care of. What I think Kim's done, what is the most interesting thing is the variety.
Yes.
And how, you know, where we used to do maybe a larger type event, she's doing much more, but probably hitting a bigger, you know, smaller events, more of them, but we're getting more people involved for all different levels of interest. And I think that's been the thing where, you know, our community engagement is one of our primary goals, but we look at it from, you know, what is community engagement opportunities, whether more informational or educational. So we sort of have a category of things like that. What are the ones that we want to get feedback from our community? That's a critical policy decision. about to be made, like solid waste that we're going to be
Right.
looking at.
Right.
So how do we get that feedback to the board beforehand? And then there's opportunities just for residents to say, I want to get involved, I want to participate, I want to be a volunteer, something like our CPA or our Great American Cleanup.
Yep.
CERT, there's so many ways that they can get involved to better their community and, you know, contribute their talent to a good cause. And then the last one are just the ones that they're meant to have fun. And you know, get together with your neighbor and enjoy an evening that's either free or at very low cost that's close to your home. And many of those are family friendly, but
Very
you know,
family
all of them are
friendly.
family friendly, but
Yes.
some of them are designed for kids, some of them are designed for adults. So it's the variety of different things that we've got involved and gotten very positive feedback from that.
And these are some wonderful things, again, that we're looking forward to in 2015. But of course, I have to ask, the biggest part of it is we're looking at these things, but what do you still find is going to be the biggest challenge that we're going to face? Because we can plant the roses and we can make it all look pretty, but obviously our hands still need to get dirty now and again. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge? Let's look 2015, but let's also look through, as we're talking, this is a 5-year plan. What else are we looking out there that may be those stumblers?
Yeah, the one that keeps me awake is the infrastructure.
That's what I was going to say as well. Absolutely. Because if you want to attract new residents into your community and you want to retain the ones that you have, the infrastructure has got to be much more stable than it is at this particular point, which means we have to have some revenue coming in to help enhance the infrastructure of the township.
Sure. And it also sounds like there's going to be a lot of discussion. And this is
Absolutely.
obviously not going to be, and this never has been, a discussion that a decision that was made on the merits and the backs of the trustees or through Mike. Just it came to always comes to the resident. And as you said, sometimes those answers aren't popular.
They're just limited choices, I think, is the way in which you can do it. And that's you know, to take our roads right now and make every street in what we would call good condition is a $40 million price tag. So we know that's, you know, now you don't, if you know, you're not going to be able to do that all at once, but we need to do something because we're falling further and further behind, and it doesn't become easier 3 years from now, it becomes worse. And while that wasn't, you know, the problem with infrastructure is largely invisible. Roads aren't. People see roads,
right.
But
if my road's in good condition today, what's it going to look like in 5 years? So when it's time for that street to be repaved, if the other 200 are waiting ahead of it, then it's not going to happen when its turn is due, and the frustration that's going to build from residents when they're driving across that road. And of course, the cost of repairing, you know, a lane mile is increasing every year for the most part as well. So that's the one, as I said, that's what keeps me awake at night.
That's a
challenge
right
you know,
there.
we're going to have to try to attack it from a lot of different angles, like we have with everything, and you know, get a plan. But ultimately, the beautiful thing about township governance is, you know, even with the JEDs, residents get to decide.
Yeah.
The board cannot increase taxes on their own. That's something that ultimately the residents have to make that decision at the ballot box.
But of course, the important thing is that people came out yesterday.
Yes.
People showed up, that they do show that they do still care about their township.
Absolutely.
As a final wrap-up, let's take a look. How did you both feel about the address itself, the attendance? Do you feel that, I'm hearing there was a lot of feedback. There was a lot of, people came and spoke to me about this, and that's the really main goal of this. Mike, you can stand up there and give information all you want, and the township, you know, the trustees can sit out there and say, this is what plan we'd like to present to you. But it ultimately comes down to, okay, I heard your information. Now let me tell you what I feel. And I think that is the most important. How did you feel about last night's discussions afterwards, the reception of the presentation itself?
I'm pretty self-critical, so
Yes, he is.
from my standpoint, my struggle is I'm told about, you know, twice a day from my elected officials and my staff is I get pretty wordy, and so I'm very passionate about the story we have to tell, and I always try to look at it, what would I want to know if I was a resident? Well, I am a resident, but if I wasn't in the position I was, and it becomes hard sometimes to condense. It was probably a little long, but I think in general, I think it was well received. You know, you always feel like you're leaving out some component that doesn't tell the full story, and then you're going to get a bunch of questions, and you spend that time. So you try to cover it. But I think, you know, the comments that I heard were positive. Generally, the feedback I've got afterwards wasn't maybe necessarily on the whole thing, but on, hey, I've got a specific issue and this is a good opportunity, which is what we want folks to do to address a particular problem in their neighborhood or a question that they have. But in general, nothing but positive comments.
And I think from what I understood with the individuals that I spoke with, they really appreciated the fact that we had the departments, each department there, which basically described some of the things and responsibilities that they have and they do. And they had an opportunity to speak one-on-one with the various department heads and again look at some of the challenges that they see and ask them questions as well about, you know, police safety or about snow removal, about the parks, you know. So they had a wonderful opportunity. They met with Kim with Art Connect. She was, you know, had her booth set up.
Sure.
So they were able to move around instead of sitting for a whole afternoon. Now Mike's presentation, he feels like it was lengthy and to a point, but the people were able to get up and move around, and they had their families with them as well. So I think it went well yesterday. The bottom line is it was a beautiful day, and they could have spent their Sunday afternoon someplace else.
But they chose
to come to sit with us. They even gave up their March Madness game for a few minutes. You know.
That is fair. That is true. But again, if you did miss that, you can always catch it here on Government Access. We'll be replaying that throughout the entire month. So make sure you stay informed as well. I want to make sure that everybody can get that opportunity to watch it as well. Well, we have made it to the bottom of that time, and I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're giving everybody the opportunity to speak here on Talking With. And Mike, Gwen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jason.
Again,
Jason, thanks for having
a great address last night, and we
you.
look forward to our next meeting, which will be closer to the end of spring, summer. So we'll see you back then.
Be ready for cool weather.
Oh,
Believe it or not.
I can't say anything.
Yeah, don't let her talk now.
We won't let Gwen be our weather forecaster,
No,
but we'll.
I did, and bad things happen, and I'm not going to say
So
anymore.
we're going to say welcome to spring, and both again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
And of course, I want to thank you for joining us as well. This has been Talking with Springfield Township, your opportunity to talk with those in the know in your township. Again, I want to thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Have a great evening.